Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm truly delighted to moderate the panel 11. This session promises to be insightful and rewarding, and I hope dynamic. I know that is after lunch. It's difficult to have some serious discussion, but I promise you that the discussion will be very, very serious. So our focus will be on strategic themes, PTX and geopolitics. And you know that the geopolitics of energy has always shaped global power. For decades, oil was the driving force, giving exporting countries strategic influence and reinforcing the dominance of major energy companies. Then, natural gas gained momentum with LNG demand surging in Asia and Europe. The Russia-Ukraine war disrupted supply chains, forcing a reorganization of them. Today, we may be witnessing another shift. Many countries have announced decarbonization ambition. Europe stands out as the only region moving decisively with regulatory measures. China and India are rising as major consumers of both clean and fossil energy. The United States, depending on the administration, oscillates between global leadership in fossil fuels and hesitation regarding the energy transition. Some regions, such as Africa and MENA, hold large oil and gas reserves, while also having significant potential for solar and wind energy. The Gulf states are positioning themselves as hubs for green and low-carbon energy. At the same time, some African countries, currently importers of fossil fuels, like Morocco, have the ambition of becoming exporters of clean energy and could emerge as important regional players in the global energy landscape. Over the course of the 2 days discussion, several key determinants of energy security emerge as priorities: access to critical minerals, diversification of energy resources, viability of clean technologies, harmonization of standards and regulations, resilience of supply chain, and development of cross-border infrastructure. These factors are essential to ensure reliable, sustainable, and affordable energy supply in a rapidly changing global context. So this raises key questions. First, is Power-to-X truly becoming a transformative force in the energy sector, reshaping industrial value chains and geopolitical dependencies? Second, will sustainable molecules such as hydrogen, e-fuel, ammonia, translate this technological shift into a new global trade system, reshaping trade flows, redefining actors, and influencing international governance? So to address the strategic questions, I'm pleased to introduce our distinguished panelists who will share their expertise and diverse perspectives. Zuhair Hamdi, Executive Director of the Regional Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency in the MENA region. Dawood Ansari, President of the Majan Council, Oman's first independent think tank, leading research on energy transition and beyond. Nesma Jrondi, senior expert in sustainable development with more than 15 years of expertise. And Ali Zerwali, Vice President of the African Commission of the General Confederation of Moroccan Enterprises. So my question will be to you, Dr. Zuhair Hamdi. First, could you share with us how the MENA region is evolving energy landscape, and whether there are some elements pointing its geopolitical transformation in the short or mid-term? The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please allow me first to thank the organizers for this very kind invitation and for allowing me to be here among this very distinguished audience. Regarding the MENA region and the ongoing global energy transformation, and I like the word transformation because energy transition is sometimes understood as limited to only the shift from one source of fuel to another or for one technology to the other, whereas the term energy transformation is actually much more wider, and it talks about the whole impact on the global political economy. So it is very much a paradigm change that the energy transformation is, the ongoing energy transformation is going to make on the global power balance. As far as the MENA region is concerned, historically, and for the past 100 years, the geopolitics of the region has been mainly shaped by fossil fuels, and especially the countries that actually produce and sell their fossil fuel resources to the international markets. So you have two groups of countries. You have the countries that net producing and net exporting countries and net importing countries. And there were some kind of dependencies that existed among the net exporting and the net importing countries. And in my opinion, I think the global energy transformation that is taking place is somehow going to change a little bit this balance within the MENA region already. Because shifting to renewable energy is going to enhance the energy security of the net importing countries. So it will reduce their dependencies on external factors and on the import of fossil fuels. But at the same time, the net exporting countries will also be affected because it will impact their standing on the global energy markets. With the reducing demand on fossil fuels, there is a very possible reduction in their capacity to influence within the MENA region and globally. And I say potential because also we must not forget one very important thing when we talk about geopolitics is that from an academic perspective, you have two main trends or schools, if you want. You have one that is a very deterministic, school, like the classical school of Mackinder, for example, where it says that your position and geopolitical standing depends on your geographical positioning and geographical factors, and you are determined by that. Whereas in the past decades, we have seen a more open and flexible school of geopolitics, where it insists more on the decision-making by the political, economic leadership and how they perceive the environment, how they react to it, and how they adapt to it. It insists also on technology and how you adapt these technologies and develop them and R&D capacities. It insists on how you place yourself on the global economic map and the partnerships that you also develop in that perspective, and also how you are placed within the global critical minerals trade flows and capacity also of processing these raw materials, as we can see very clearly with China, which is a country that controls somehow, has a monopoly on the reprocessing and not on the minerals themselves. So all these factors, I think, are very important, and I think that any country that now wants to have a place in this ongoing global transformation, it will have to put very ambitious renewable energy targets. It have to put in place an ambitious industrial policy. It will have to place itself and to be part of new trade partnerships and economic partnerships. This is the way how these countries are going to be able to adapt to the ongoing energy transformation. So, in my opinion, nothing is determined, and I believe in the capacity of human beings to adapt to their environment and how they shape their own reality in the ongoing global energy transformation. Now, the countries that are the net exporting countries, we can see that many of them, not all of them, unfortunately, but many of them are also embracing this global energy transformation. We can see that in the MENA region, the countries that invest the most in renewable energy are the oil-producing countries of the Gulf. I think that the countries of the Gulf have seized this opportunity. They have seen the opportunity of renewable energy, not only for placing themselves globally, but also in order to reduce their own domestic energy consumption, which is extremely very high, and it has an economic cost on their own economies. So the dynamics, I think, are happening. They are ongoing. If we take the example of Morocco, for example, Morocco is a country that is also embracing this very well, very ambitious renewable energy targets. As far as my work is concerned in the region, I can tell you that Morocco is considered as a leader in the development of renewable energy. We can see that there is also industrial policy that is in place. We can see that R&D is enhancing. I was very impressed by what I have seen in the Green Energy Park in Ben Gurir, which I visited before the beginning of this event. So I think if we add to it, talking about industrial policy, the industrial hub of Tangier, for example. So we can see that there is a real direction from the policymakers to place Morocco into this ongoing energy transformation and to be a major player in the new geopolitical map that is being shaped now.
Thank you very much. I give the floor to Dr. Dawood and asking the same question from your perspective, how Power2X could shape the global geopolitical landscape.
Thank you so much for the interesting question, and let me start with the direct answer to it. Even if Power2X in the end turns out to be not taking as much from the energy mix as we perhaps have thought a couple of years ago, there will still be a noticeable effect. And then let me proceed with the perhaps longer explanation behind that intuition. So when we mention the term geopolitics in terms of energy particularly, so what we mean by that is largely a concentrated resource energy that in a spatial dimension is suddenly being connected to political power, and it can both be the object or the subject of that political power. We obviously have examples for both. So we do have in the Cold War especially, we see new technologies, we see nuclear energy eventually leading to new institutions like the International Atomic Agency that are being founded, and on the other hand, we have very clearly examples of how basically current conflicts are affecting the energy landscapes. And to that extent, it is important to say first that renewable energies, and PTX in particular, but also renewable energy in general, isn't that much different. So in this new world, we perhaps have new power currencies, we perhaps have new things that matter that haven't so much mattered in earlier days in a purely oil and gas world. So we now have technology itself, and who has access to that technology is a very important factor. We have access to critical minerals as something new. We have the question, who is able to define standards? These are the big power currencies that we talk about in this new renewable energy world. And Power2X in particular, if we look a bit back, even just in a couple of years, then we see how much the trajectory of Power2X and hydrogen is connected to geopolitical developments. Well, from the perspective of the European Union, that is, or at least was thinking about being the largest off-taker of hydrogen. This started out to a large extent out of post-COVID funds, the infamous EU Green Deal. And then eventually these plans became so much more important when Europe was faced with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, that eventually turned, at least from a European perspective, energy, the energy map, just completely switched that entire map, and suddenly switching to other energy carriers, and even more importantly, switching to other energy suppliers became something that is far more important. And so at that time we thought of PTX mainly as a seller's market, right? So that's when the European Union said that we want to import 10 million tons of hydrogen every single year by 2030. 2030 is basically tomorrow. We're getting old, let's be honest. These numbers would mean that eventually ramping up that hydrogen production is creating a new power dynamics, particularly in favor of those countries that export hydrogen. Now we've seen over the past years that eventually the intense offtake that we were anticipating towards 2030 is perhaps not reaching that scale, or at least not that quickly. And that it turned hydrogen on PTX over the past years to some extent into something like a seller's market. And now we're seeing here how the seller's market itself is having its own geopolitics. Particularly October 7 and the subsequent genocide in Gaza is incredibly important for understanding how hydrogen has developed over the past years, because it has been those very hydrogen off-takers that have in Europe that have chosen different positions vis-a-vis what is happening in the Middle East as a crucial factor to decide whom do we want to off-take hydrogen from. It's quite essential to see at this point that this tells us two important things. So on the one hand, and this is an issue we need to perhaps address more directly. How much agency do we as potential hydrogen producers actually have? Essentially, given how the market has developed, a lot of the power to develop standards, the power to change those standards, and also the power to perhaps make us compromise on other things has increasingly been given to the hydrogen off-takers who is somewhere else. And we need to find out how can we rebalance that very equation. A second thing that we need to think about, and that is especially important since until now, obviously, it is especially engineers and technical folks that are very much driving Power-to-X and hydrogen. An important lesson that we can learn from that, so eventually prior to October 7, pretty much the debate was focused on who is the least cost producer in hydrogen, and people were believing, well, if you're the least cost producer of hydrogen, then you'll definitely get the deal. And we've increasingly seen, no, that is not necessarily the case. Eventually, the levelized cost of hydrogen is one interesting factor, but it's by far not the only, and frankly, not really the determining factor that will decide whether countries or companies are going to invest in hydrogen, whether companies or countries are going to offtake hydrogen. And here we are actually moving into something that is even far beyond energy geopolitics, and we can perhaps rather dub it energy diplomacy to some extent. That is getting there's a super important factor that unfortunately sometimes we're not really analyzing that deep. Well, to come back to the original question, to circle back to that, you could obviously be inclined to say that, well, if offtake is rather limited, then the geopolitics of hydrogen are also not going to be that relevant. That is not necessarily the case, because what we've seen, and what that is one of the central things that happens from the development, or not from the development, that happens when approaching renewable energy, value and supply chains are getting significantly more complex. And this new complexity bears completely different and far harder to track and to monitor dependencies that we have. And even if I'm talking unconditional, PTX and hydrogen turn out to be not as big as initially anticipated. Think of, for instance, the fertilizer industries. Fertilizers are completely central goods to the global food system. And we already now are seeing that fertilizers are obviously are concentrated in their production. Hydrogen might even further, PTX might even further lead to a concentration of the production of fertilizers, and suddenly, well, you have PTX being part of as an essential part of the global food system. And that tells us that simply by the way how these new value and supply chains look like, that even if PTX was limited, it may still have a significant effect on global geopolitics.
Thank you, Dr. Dawood, for highlighting this point, this important point. Then Nesma, as you know, many countries have set 2030 as target, as a year where we should achieve many strategies related to decarbonization, to green hydrogen. And if we look to 2030, which countries do you think, or alliances, are best positioned to dominate this global trade, and particularly in green molecules?
Thank you for the question, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank the organizers for the invitation. So first of all, we need to understand that geopolitics of hydrogen are fundamentally different of geopolitics of fossil fuels. So basically hydrogen, it's a manufactured product, not an extracted one. So as long as you have affordable renewable energy and water, you can become producers of hydrogen. And as a matter of fact, a broader set of countries can participate in the global hydrogen trade. Morocco is one of them. It's positioning itself in a leader position, but other countries like Chile, Namibia, and Brazil are also emerging like key players. So they benefit from the abundant renewable resources they have and their strategic geopolitical positions. Also, the GCC countries are positioning themselves. So the Gulf countries are moving from announcement to developing deployment. Several large projects like the Eon in Saudi and Yanbu in UAE combine green and blue hydrogen and hedging a strategy across colors and technologies. So we can see also a new positioning of that region. And the original fossil fuels producers also changing their strategies to more renewable and more hydrogen and green energies also. So that's from the producer side. From the importers, so we have Europe and Northeast Asia. So they're becoming major importers. The European Union alone has set a target of 10 million tons of hydrogen imports by 2030. But the thing is, only 25% of that global hydrogen demand will meet international trade. Most of it, 75%, will be produced and consumed domestically, which opens a wide set of opportunities for development of local industries. And this is exactly what we're trying to do here in Morocco. The OCP group, as you know, is developing green ammonia and also other e-molecules. So we need also to keep in mind that other derivatives can be produced locally and help the development of local industries, especially in developing countries. And this is what actually we need for creating jobs and helping our economy.
Thank you, Nisma. Ali will focus now on the African region. So we know that there are many countries that have the potential of renewables, investing also in creating conditions for green hydrogen or power to X. So do you think that there are places for cooperation or integration to enhance competitiveness between countries in this region? So how can we enhance competitiveness? How can we create conditions for cooperation?
Thank you, Munia. First, I trust a lot Nesma, and she just mentioned 3 countries that are leaders, positioned as leaders for green hydrogen. And I represent also HIV Global, which is the world leader in e-fuel, and I'm happy to listen to you because we're positioning also in Brazil and Chile, and we're trying to position in Morocco. So it was just between brackets. And come back to the African cooperation. So we made a very great work at the CGM with the support of the African Development Bank. We just took note that if you compare the different regions, so you have East of Asia that have more than 50% of economic integration and trade integration between those countries. When you go to Europe, it's around 70% of the trade that is made enter Europe. And when it comes to Africa, it's quite a shame, but it's only 15%, 1.5. The best area is the West Africa, that we as Moroccan, we know very well, but it's roughly around 25 to 28%. So there is something why we don't have a lot of trade. And we started to study during 2 years, 1.5 years, with the African Development Bank to see how we can create value chain in order to tackle that. And we identified 4 sectors. The first one is the automotive, and the thing is that we need to build a South-South cooperation with a complementary value chain to connect the upstream in Africa to Morocco and then to the rest of the world, because Morocco has a lot of its free trade agreements and a very good connection to the global economy. And we identified then, so the automotive, the agro industry, the textile, and the energy. And one of the most important sector in the energy is this value chain regarding the power to X. And we also identified that when we go to the e-fuels, and especially e-methanol, for example, there is a great value chain to construct. Basically, one of the levers is that in these tropical areas, West Africa, for example, but down to Central Africa, you have a lot of biomass that could be EUDR compliant with the European legislation, and this biomass is not used. It's considered as waste and residues. So if we can have a value chain that collects this biomass, maybe pelletize it and bring it into this intra-African trade, then it could be brought to Morocco and then mix it with green hydrogen to create e-fuels that are eligible for the European legislation. So even if we criticize a lot the European legislation, putting a lot of hurdles and complexity in all what they made, because maybe they thought only about Europe, and then they said, import, let's copy paste. Then it creates an opportunity for us, because with this framework we can create more cooperation between African countries. And then maybe later on I will also mention some studies that we made at the UN level to advise the Secretary General, and that could maybe disrupt all this PTX sector to create more market within Africa. Thank you.
So another round of questions maybe for our distinguished speakers. Let me go through some specific topic. We see that MENA region, there are some landscape is changing, both for net exporters or net importers. There are some potentials, but the ambition should be concrete for countries to take position. My question will be related to which kind of cooperation we should enhance in this region. Do you think that is place for cooperation or competition?
Thank you. Very good question, talking about the MENA region, because from the work that we do, for example, in the center, the work tends to be more on a bilateral basis than on a regional basis. So what we can see is that it is the regional work tends to be more challenging and slower than the bilateral work that we do at the center. It doesn't mean that there are no regional, initiatives or work that is being done, but this is what I noticed, since I started, working in the center, and even before when I was also working at IRENA, that was also something that was very noticeable. We, as RICRI, we are the technical arm of the League of Arab States, and we attend the meetings of the Committee of Experts for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency. And yes, there are some initiatives that are taking place. Like, for example, recently we have been tasked as the center to develop a kind of framework on carbon trading in the Arab region. We have also been tasked to develop a conceptual framework on green hydrogen, and they insisted on low carbon hydrogen. Low carbon hydrogen, that was an insistence on many countries and that members of the League of Arab States, is to work mainly on low carbon, including, of course, green hydrogen. So, and we are organizing an event, actually, maybe in February, regarding low carbon in the Arab region, in partnership with the League of Arab States. So there are some dynamics that are ongoing. In my opinion, they are still not very strong. I think they need more time to be more mature and to be stronger and to be expanded to all the countries of the Arab region. But what is important to note from the work that we do regionally is that there is more and more interest from the countries of the region on everything that is related to Power to X. The interest is there. There are many questions, yes. There is a lot of skepticism about it, yes. But still, there is an interest, and many countries have adopted very ambitious targets as far as green hydrogen is concerned, and among them is Oman, for example. That is, in my opinion, the country that has set the highest, targets, and not only targets, they are actually implementing it. It's something that is happening on the ground. Saudi Arabia, UAE, Egypt, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco. So all these countries, most of them have set targets and have engaged themselves, in that route. Even if, again, there is some skepticism about it, and we want to be there, but cautiously. So we want to see how the markets are going to evolve, if there are going to be any off-takers, how the demand is going to evolve, and specifically looking towards the European markets, because this is where the demand would most probably come in the future. The regional dynamics also that exist, that we can see them happening more and more in the region, is about the interconnection. There are lots of projects of interconnection that already exist. In my opinion, the best example of a very well-structured, interconnected region is the GCC Interconnection Authority for the GCC area. It's a very good example of a successful interconnection. The GCC is also investing a lot on connecting itself to Africa through Ethiopia, connecting to Egypt, connecting to Jordan, connecting to Iraq. Egypt also is going very ambitiously on that route with Sudan, and lower down with East Africa. So there are, we can see as far as interconnection the efforts of interconnection that are ongoing, and in my opinion, interconnection is going to be very important in this flow of electricity and trade of electricity within the region. But before we reach that trade, there are a lot of reforms that need to be done, because we need first to create the electricity market. For the moment, it is a trade. It's not really a trade, it's an exchange of electricity rather than a trade. So there is a need to reform the electricity markets nationally, to reduce the subsidies on electricity, and to gradually create an electricity market in the Arab region. The GCC is going towards that region. The GCC has gradually moved from the exchange, and now there is more and more trade that is ongoing. And I think that this should be happening throughout the whole Arab region, in my opinion. We can see also, as far as the renewable energy project is concerned, we can see some big players, industrial players like Aqua Power, like Masdar, that are becoming more and more involved in industrial projects in the region. This is part of the energy or renewable energy diplomacy, actually, of the GCC countries. In my opinion, it is very successful. They have very ambitious projects here in Morocco, and in Egypt, and in other countries of the Arab region. So even if the regional dynamic for the moment is not up to what we are expecting and hoping for, but in my opinion, I think that the external pressures, the global dynamics of the global trade are going to be pushing for more and more exchange between the countries of the Arab region.
I totally agree, because I know in the Power to X landscape, it's the interconnection between countries and cooperation and partnership is not only option. We need to have this interconnectivity to set successful projects. So from your opinion, Dr. Daoud, do you think, so we see that, as I said, the landscape is depending on many factors. It's not just having resources is enough to set successful projects or to be competitive. So who will be leading this landscape? Are there countries that are mastering technologies, countries that are developing rules and regulations, countries that are having natural resources. So that's the game. Who will be the leaders of this global landscape, if it is it?
I'm not going to move myself into any potential issues at any airport I might visit by naming certain countries here. But no, generally speaking, I mean, something that I have been talking about quite a lot when hydrogen became a thing, and many people were quoting, or many people were mainly focusing on the question, who is, whatever, where do we have the largest solar potential, all these questions. And I would say, well, this is a very important question for the long run, right? So for the long run, if we say that we end up producing hydrogen and using PTX all around the world, then obviously a big question is going to be where can we find all that solar and wind potential? But we're now talking about ramping up a sector, and for ramping up a sector, an important question is who has access to the resources that you need to make this happen as quickly as possible. And if you include that, then many countries that are on the list, and frankly even some countries that have limited offtake agreements with European off-takers, and that's what there's certain European countries are currently realizing. Those are not the best choices to go with in those circumstances, because eventually a country that might have great natural, great renewable energy resources, that is not necessarily the country that is going to be able to deliver on producing hydrogen or any other PTX-derived goods as quickly as possible. And when I say resources, that does not just mean financial resources, because interestingly, almost no country around the world says, I am going to invest in hydrogen. Right? So also not Saudi Arabia or Oman or any other GCC country say, well, we are literally going to build those facilities ourselves. We might co-finance depending on how this looks like. We might take care of the infrastructure. We might take care of the institutions, but we're not gonna do that. And that is not due to a lack of finance. That's due to a risk question. That's due to the point that no country wants to bear the sole risk of investing in a project that is, frankly, so uncertain at this very point. But other things that definitely matter here are know-how. How much background does a country have in running these big projects? How much knowledge does a country have in the petrochemical industries? These things are eventually important when we talk about PTX downstream. But you obviously also raised another point of who are those countries that might lead when it comes to regulations. And here again, what we have unfortunately seen to some extent is we've seen over the past years the shift of power from the producers towards the potential off-takers. And we are now largely in a situation in which eventually, well, whatever the off-takers want, most likely many potential hydrogen producers are just gonna deliver it. And that is obviously an issue far beyond hydrogen. It doesn't just mean for hydrogen that you're essentially you're giving power somewhere else, but you're essentially building a supply chain, you're building a value chain for decades to come, and that obviously comes with new dependencies that, well, we probably don't really appreciate, and we don't appreciate how deep and long-standing these things goes. So unfortunately, the short answer is at the moment, the big chunk of power in the market at the moment lies with the off-takers. However, that will also depend in the future on the question, how proactive are we in other parts of the world when it comes to climate legislation and similar. And there I really just want to quickly basically pick up the question, what you said concerning cooperation and collaboration. And I would actually say, well, at the moment we do have quite a lot of communication. So we communicate quite a lot between prospective hydrogen producers. But we don't really collaborate that much yet. And that is an issue far beyond hydrogen. If we, it obviously does make sense if you say that we have a limited number of pilots, we have limited demand, that obviously there is competition and no one says not. But if we continue to see the world as giant zero-sum games, then this is not going to lead us anywhere. If we look and if we just talk even about stability, I mean, one of the sources of stability in the European Union, for instance, is the division of supply chains across the continent. And eventually, unless we're talking in the global south about the question how not just to take, not just to monopolize new value chains, but how to potentially distribute those value chains in a fashion that creates a beneficial sense of mutual dependency and mutual interest, until we reach that point, we might end up in zero-sum games.
Dr. Dawood, so offtake is key element, and all the countries that are positioning themselves in the Power-to-X trying to secure the access to the market. So what are they leveraging in terms of diplomacy, infrastructure, framework? So Nisma, can you share with us your insights on that point?
I think there are 6 elements I would like to focus on. So first of all is the hydrogen diplomacy. As mentioned by my colleagues, we need more partnerships. We need to communicate more between each other. And forums like this one are very strategic. I've heard there are more than 50 countries represented here in Marrakesh, so this is a great opportunity to tie strategic partnerships. Also, we have to see hydrogen as from the energy security perspective. So green hydrogen enhances energy security by diversifying fuel mixes and reducing import dependence, especially in hard-to-abate sectors. And we know in Morocco that we are still, relying a lot on fossil fuels, and we import all those fossil fuels. So we need to develop our own sources of energy. Also, infrastructure and connectivity. So many countries are investing in hydrogen-ready infrastructure, pipelines, ports, storage, and also repurposing existing natural gas networks. Morocco is exploring hydrogen corridors to Europe, leveraging its proximity and renewable potential, and the possibility also to use the Maghreb-Europe gas pipeline. So other options also are on the table. We mentioned also regulations and policy. So we talked about the EU carbon border adjustment mechanism that is shaping access to market and competitiveness. So certifications and certification standards and the guarantees of origin are also becoming essentials. We can see countries engaging in bilateral agreements, and the African ESG framework that was presented yesterday by the minister is a good opportunity to position, Africa's standard in this global landscape. Also, I want to mention technology access, because without technology we cannot develop our energy system. It's not only about having the resources, it's about having the tools to harness them. And we need electrolyzers, we need smart grids, we need hydrogen-ready infrastructure, and clean energy technologies are highly concentrated in few countries. For example, we see what's happening in China with the solar PV and batteries manufacturing. We must invest in local manufacturing, promote technology transfer, and secure intellectual property rights. Last but not least, the investment, climate, and governance. In order to, attract investors, we need good governance and, facilitate the climate investment. So that includes clear regulatory frameworks, risk mitigation instruments, and public-private partnerships. So this goes also with good governance. Stable governance is the foundation of energy diplomacy. It builds trust with international partners and ensures that P2X projects are aligned with national development goals. So yes, governance also affects certification, permitting environmental and safeguards that are increasingly important in the global PTX trade.
Thank you, Nsma. Ali, if we consider the transformation that are driven by Power-to-X, we see we can have some countries that change their status from net importers to maybe net exporters of energy. Maybe for African countries that we can generalize access to electricity with very competitive prices. Do you think that this global transformation will enhance or reduce inequality between countries, particularly if you want to talk about African countries, as they have renewables, raw materials, critical materials? Do you think that we can have opportunity to create conditions for country to take its place in the global landscape and reduce inequalities and enhance access to energy? Or there are still some bottlenecks or some challenges to face and to resolve?
I think that in your question there is a response. Africa is blessed with renewables, with raw materials, and has the lowest access to energy. And when we say that, I cannot just miss one figure, is that only 2% of the renewable energy in the world is installed in Africa, while Africa has more than 40% of the renewable energy potential in the world. And then I would like to mention the spirit of our King, our Majesty, may God bless him. And you know that very well. He said that if Africa wants to move forward, Africa needs to trust in Africa, in its forces, and to develop a sustainable growth. And maybe this is the situation also with the Power-to-X. Each time we are looking to hydrogen economy, we only look to its value towards Europe. We want to produce and to send to Europe, while we have a lack of energy in Africa. And this sustainable energy that could be the most competitive in the world could support the development of an industrial ecosystem. So I liked somehow the intervention of the Minister Riyad Mazzour yesterday when he was saying, but how could we get that in Morocco? And it's the same case in all the African countries for our market, instead of just looking to export these resources in molecules. So if we can get rid of the European legislation, which is good for Europe but not for us, and make this effort to draw a legislation that is adapted to our country. We still want it to be green, but we want to relax from some constraints like the biogenic CO2, like the hourly matching, some things that doesn't match to our countries. Then I'm sure that we can get to a level of e-gasoline that could be equal to the gasoline that we are importing. So it doesn't mean only then creating an industrial ecosystem. It's also reducing our commercial balance deficit by replacing importing of fossil fuels by green production. And then it's a business model that could last 30 years, so facilities that could last 30, 50 years, and then you can come to the parity and the equality with the fossil. And I was just 3 days ago in Ivory Coast. So I was looking to a beautiful mosque that was made by our king in Morocco, and I saw just behind a refinery. And we don't have a refinery in Morocco, so I was like, oh, you get a refinery. And they explained to me that they were selling the crude oil and that they have with a very high quality and importing very low quality crude oil to produce. And then I said, but for what? And they explained to me that all the generators and all the air conditioning is based on this fuel. And I was, but you have hydro. You are one of the country that is the most blessed for hydro. And they said, yeah, but we don't know how to develop this project in a large scale because there is a lack of bankability in the offtake. But the offtaker is there. You have the offtaker that is also already using fossil fuel, and you could produce your electricity at 1 or 2 cents, and you have the biomass, so all the value chain there. So I think if we can make this effort to just change our mindset, and instead of looking always to the developed countries market, to look to our needs and how we can develop our own production to respond to our needs, we could enter in a very sustainable growth with a strong industrial content.
Thank you. We have still 10 minutes left. If there is some question from the audience, so we'll be pleased to answer to them. Okay. I have also one question, and if you want to answer to this. So, do we need a global governance system to create conditions for these emerging sectors, to create conditions for more how can balanced competition or more equal advantage for different countries? So as we see for oil, there is OPEP. So I'm asking if we have in some region, we need to have very added value competition and not only rivalry or some tension that may be created in some at regional level. So my question, do we think that we have to work as countries in Africa or MENA regional to create conditions for this cooperation, harmonization? Or
Thank you. Regarding renewable energy, and even talking about Power-to-X, it will be very difficult to envisage something like OPEC, because the oil market is based on stocks. This is not the case of renewable energy, so it's very, very difficult to have something similar to that organization. But the concept of cooperation is a must. I mean, this is it's not a choice. It's not whether you want or you don't want to. You have to coordinate and to collaborate. And cooperation needs, first of all, to have a good governance within your own country. You must have a good strategy. You must set targets and create the proper environment for the development of such technologies. And then you start by your regional cooperation. So you cooperate with your immediate, neighbors. You create a regional market, and it's only with that regional market that you can then place yourself to negotiate with other blocs. Because if you go as a country in the region individually and you go and negotiate with Europe alone, you don't have much weight. It doesn't make sense. But if you go as a bloc, as a region, as the Arab region, you go and you collaborate and negotiate a collaboration with the EU or with Latin America or with Africa or with any other region, then you will give to yourself much more weight. So regional cooperation is a must if we really want to be able to place ourselves in this new global energy map.
Thank you for the very interesting question and the hypothetical. And I try to give a very nuanced answer to that. So on the one hand, I mean, especially since you also used OPEC as an example, for something such as OPEC to eventually become an efficient tool of energy policy and economic policy, you need to have very certain conditions. So you need to have large global demand. You needed to have the closure of the Suez Canal that happened at that time. So there were a lot of geopolitical conditions actually that made this possible. And perhaps if we look into Power-to-X, the most constraining factor for doing something like this is that simply offtake at the moment is too small to create a a meaningful alliance, to say that broadly. However, and that comes with two caveats. So on the one hand, I'm not talking about the short run. On the long run, yes, definitely. We, for a couple of reasons, have not seen something similar to OPEC in the natural gas sector, which frankly is I think for gas exporting countries quite a shame. It could have had quite some benefit, and the same obviously goes for hydrogen. So if one day we are in a position where we say that yes, hydrogen is taking over a significant share of the energy mix, then yes, there's definitely something that we should look at, and that leads me to my second point. What can happen even now, and also recalling what Dr. Zahir just said. We should also enter the regional dimension to this more. So especially if we've seen, I'm now being a bit open and perhaps even critical, the way we've seen how the European Union and different European member countries have been approaching Tunisia, Algeria, and Morocco when it came to hydrogen. Well, eventually they have leveraged existing divides between countries. They have leveraged the absence of regional collaboration and coordination in the energy sector, and that eventually has created white space for agency to be given outside towards Europe. And so something that can happen now is, yes, on a regional level and perhaps even far beyond PTX, energy collaboration and coordination, even if it doesn't end up being a quota setting thing such as OPEC, but saying that there is regional collaboration within the Maghreb countries, or then also vice versa in other regions of the globe. This is something that can be a very feasible first step towards redistributing some of that power towards the producer economies.
You want to? Okay, thank you very much. So if there is no other questions, thank you very much for this very insightful discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me by applauding our panelists. Thank you for your contribution.